Let's be together in prayer. Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Last week when I was away, I understand that Tom Ryberg had to throw away the sermon he'd been writing on being an inviting church in order to address the tragic news of the slaughter of 9 African American women and men at Mother Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, by a white supremacist. This week I get to throw away my plans for a second sermon on being an inviting church in order to address the good news from Friday's United States Supreme Court ruling extending marriage rights to same-gendered couples. Tragedy and triumph. Soul-sucking hatred and transformational love. Inconsolable grief and uncontainable joy. Right in the middle of a sermon series on our strategic priority of being an inviting church. Do we really want to invite people into that swirling mixture of the worst and the best that life has to offer? Some churches don't. Some just focus on the best. They offer the promise that Jesus wants you to have only the good things of life. If you accept their invitation to come into their church and profess their faith and sing their sacred songs and pray their prayers, they promise that your life will be blessed. Your marriage problems will fade away, your fortunes will increase, your happiness will multiply. There are churches that proclaim a gospel of blessing and prosperity. There are other churches that focus on the worst. They paint a picture of gloom and doom for the world that we live in. If you accept their invitation to come into their church and profess their faith and sing their sacred songs and pray their prayers, they promise that you will be pardoned from the evils of this world. Even though the earth is going to hell, even though moral decline has ruined our once pride nation, even though infidels have temporarily usurped power from God-fearing men, God will not be mocked. Judgment Day is coming, but if you're in their church, you will be spared. You will be rewarded in heaven. There are churches that proclaim a gospel of condemnation and deliverance. But this church is different. Here in the United Church of Christ, we invite people to come and to celebrate the fullness of life, with all of its sorrows, all of its joys. all of the losses that convulse us with heart-wrenching grief, all the blessings that make our spirits soar and our hearts sing for praise. The United Church of Christ statement of faith includes the phrase, God calls us into the church to accept the cost and joy of discipleship. Here we invite people to bring the fullness of who they are and what they are experiencing into the life of the faith community, and together we seek the presence of God amidst that messy swirl of life. Last week, we had to grieve over the tragedy of violence born of racial hatred. This week, we have to rejoice over the triumph of love over fear. On Friday morning at 10 o'clock, Lynn and Toby were volunteering at the welcome desk here at church when the Supreme Court announced their ruling that states like ours could no longer deprive same-gendered couples of their marriage rights. Toby and Lynn have been together 28 years. They were the perfect ambassadors to be the public face of our church on Friday morning as we rejoiced in the news that their commitment to each other would now be honored everywhere. Here at First Congregational Church, we're pleased to be partnering with Battle Creek Pride to host a wedding ceremony on Friday, July 10th at 6 o'clock here in this sanctuary for same-gendered couples who have been waiting to have their marriages recognized for a long, long time. Now at last, they'll enjoy the same privileges that heterosexual couples have benefited from all throughout their marriages. Even though we hadn't planned it this way, Friday's Supreme Court ruling on same-gender marriage, I think, really does provide the perfect backdrop for exploring our strategic priority of being an inviting church. I'm not going to put you on the spot, Greg. I'm not going to ask you if you know the opening verse of the Gospel of Mark. It's the first gospel written in our New Testament collection of 4 different Gospels. The Gospel of Mark begins with these words: the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, Son of God. But there's a footnote. Footnote B, right after good news. And you read that and you think, oh, crap. It's going to be qualified. So you look down at the bottom of the page, and it's a translator's note that reminds us that good news means gospel. The beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Now, we always skip over that sentence because we want to get on with the meat and potatoes of the gospel. We want to know what Jesus said and did that is of such consequence. But that one little footnote is essential to our strategic priority of being an inviting church. We are an inviting church because we understand that gospel is good news. Good news is something we can't wait to share with others. Lily told us about that. When we discover something that enriches our lives, we feel compelled to invite others to share that experience. Marriage is the best thing that has ever happened to me. I would not be the person I am today without Patrice in my life. Truth. The state of Pennsylvania licensed my marriage. But the Church of Jesus Christ celebrated my marriage. This church, this tradition, witnessed and validated and honored and blessed the commitments that Patrice and I made to each other on December 27th, 1977. Do the math. We got married at Greenewalt's United Church of Christ in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Their pastor made time to counsel us and to plan with us and to prepare us for that moment. And even though Patrice's family were all Catholic, they were invited to come participate in the ceremony, no matter what denomination they were connected to. I love our church for graciously hosting that moment when Patrice and I committed our lives to each other. And I am eager to invite others to come to our church knowing that no matter whether their partner is same-gendered or opposite-gendered, this community will witness and validate and honor and bless their marriage commitments as well. We are a community that joyfully celebrates the bond of love that joins people's hearts as one. That is good news that has to be shared. It is easy for us to share good news with the people that we care about. That's what Andrew did with his brother Peter. John had encouraged them to spend a few days hanging out with Jesus. And when he came back, he was so excited about the things that he had seen and heard that he couldn't wait to bring Peter along with him. And we would not be here today if he hadn't. When I find something that enriches my life, no matter what it might be, I want to invite others to share in it as well. Sometimes I share that invitation in person. Sometimes I text a picture of a place or an experience that I want others to share. Sometimes I post it on Facebook. I never feel hesitant or embarrassed or uneasy about sharing good news with others because it's good news. It's something that I've found uplifting, rewarding, significant. I feel compelled to share it. with the people I care about. I don't really care if they don't get excited about it. That's perfectly okay with me. It may not be as wonderful to them as it was to me. But at least they know that this thing here is significant to me, and that helps our relationship as well. We share good news with the people we care about because we care about them, and because we know that they care about us as well. Okay, so now I want you to think about sharing the gospel with someone that you care about. What kind of reaction does that trigger in you? Did you feel your whole body recoil at the thought of sharing the gospel? Sharing good news, perfectly natural to us. Sharing the gospel feels yucky. Even though they are the same word. Gospel is an Old English word for good news. They feel profoundly different to us. The Greek word for good news, by the way, is evangelion, which is the basis for another terrifying word for us in the mainline tradition, evangelism. Bearer of good news. Oh no! When we think about sharing the gospel, we usually think about persuasion, right? We think about having to convince someone to believe something that we believe about who Jesus is or what he did or how it impacts us. We've all been accosted by overzealous evangelists who have tried to persuade us to believe the things they believe, and it always feels yucky. But our commitment to be an inviting church has nothing to do with persuasion or conversion. It has everything to do with the excitement of sharing good news. We are excited about sharing the good news that First Congregational Church is committed to being a community that embodies God's unqualified love for the world. When we say no matter who you are, no matter where you are in life's journey, you are welcome here, we actually do mean it. If you're weighed down with sorrow, you belong here. If you are ecstatic with joy, you belong here. If you are isolated and lonely, you belong here. If you are partnered with someone you love, you belong here. If you are privileged, you belong here. If you are oppressed, you belong here. There are no qualifiers to God's love, God's mercy, God's grace, no matter who, no matter where. You belong here. That's the invitation that we extend. Now, we don't always get it right. We are far, far from perfect. Sometimes we say and do things that leave people feeling ignored or neglected or unwanted. But we are trying our best to embody a noble calling, to be a beloved community where everyone knows they are loved and cherished by God, even when we disagree. even when we get on each other's nerves. Being joined to a community that shares that kind of commitment is a rare and precious gift. That's why we feel compelled to reach out and invite the people that we know and love to come and be part of this wonderfully inclusive community. And being an inclusive community means that we are constantly changing. Everyone we invite into our shared life changes who we are. Everyone that we invite into our shared life changes who we are. This past Wednesday, during our conversation on the gift of years, one of our members observed how much fulfillment she gets through her relationships with new people, people who are new to her life. They expand and enrich her world by sharing experiences and lessons that are different than her own, and they are people who are open to relating to her in new ways. They don't pigeonhole her based on her past accomplishments or her previous interests. She is able to be herself in new ways because these new relationships are unencumbered by history. What's true at the personal level is also true at the congregational level. We aren't the same church that we were 8 years ago when I first met you. New people have come into the life of our faith community, and the gifts that they contribute, and the insights that they share, and the values they embody, and the convictions that they live by have changed our church for good. We didn't talk about same-gendered marriage 8 years ago because we hadn't invited LGBT folk to bring the fullness of who they are into the life of our faith community. But now that we have, we are a queerer church than we were before. We don't have just one point of view anymore. On the contrary, we are careful to consult multiple perspectives, multiple voices, multiple orientations when we make decisions now, because today we understand that we get closer to discerning the will of God by taking into consideration the viewpoints of all of God's people. Because of our commitment to be an inviting church, we are always growing, always changing, always incorporating new perspectives, always deepening our understanding of what it means to be the body of Christ in the world today. That's the good news. That's the gospel that we feel compelled to share. May it be so. Amen.